Good evening and welcome to the Audit and Standards Committee meeting of Melton Borough Council. Members are reminded that we will be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate that they wish to speak, and to use their microphones when speaking for the benefit of all present. The microphone is live when the red light displays. Please switch mobile phones to silent. I will now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park, nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. Public recording of the meeting. There is legislation that allows the public to film, record, or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. I am Councillor Don Pritchett, the Chairman of the Audit and Standards Committee, and can confirm we have the following Melton Borough Council officers in attendance tonight. Director for Corporate Services, Dawn Garton. Director for Growth and Regeneration, Pranali Parikh. Head of Internal Audit, Rachel Ashley Corn. Democratic Services Officer, Helen Ainge. Democratic Services Officer, Carol Tedds. I've also given the Monitoring Officer, Kieran Stockley, permission to join us remotely tonight for medical reasons. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies have been given by Councillor Tim Webster, who's unwell. The next item on the agenda is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of July 2022. I will propose the minutes and request a seconder. Thank you. Noted. Councillor Wilkinson seconded. Minutes will be confirmed as approved unless any member wishes to raise any amendments. I will invite members who wish to do so to make declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. Do we have any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. The next item, number 4 on our agenda tonight, the Audit and Standards Committee annual report. I think this is the first annual report, and with it there is appended an assessment against the standards that have been published as required by the audit committees, and a work plan, an analysis, and an action plan. I don't wish to say much about this other than the annual report has been summarised in the paper, and then the assessment is on a table, separate table. It was produced in consulting with the Director for Corporate Services and the Chief Internal Auditor along the way. So basically it's over to you for any comments. Councillor Douglas.
Yes, I was wondering why that in the recommendations section that it's approving this report to the 31st of August 2022. I just found it unusual in that you would expect it to fit in with the financial year, which usually ends each April. I'm sure there's a really good explanation, but I would like to know in detail. Thank you.
There is an explanation. I don't know how good it is. It was the first report and things were in progress, and we were doing things in June and July. So we used the date we were doing it as August, and there was not a fixed date as the 31st of March. And there are often things that are done like the annual report and governance statement and things like that come through after. So it was a convenient date to get everything that we knew we were doing in and needed to do. So that was the reason.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you. Can I just comment on 4.82, where you said another area of concern is the high number of planning enforcement and condition compliance outstanding because of inadequate staff resource. This was, after all, in July. I had reason on Friday to go to Mr. Pickwill of a local person in Bottisford who was told enforcement action was being taken against a developer before and the 6 weeks ran out at the end of September and still nothing has been done. And Mr. Pickwill has now come back to me after a day or two and he said he's passed it on to Louise Parker. Now this isn't good enough. I know this isn't a meeting to take it when we should be discussing enforcement, but it's just not good enough. I mean, these people are having to drag their wheelie bins through mud because the road hasn't, it's basically the road's not been even made to an adoptable standard, but they're literally having to take their bins now onto Grantham Road. It's quite a hike for them because Biffa won't go down and empty them. This is an absolute disgrace in my opinion.
I'll make a note and follow that one up in the morning.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Chairman, part of the reason is we've not had an enforcement officer and we've only just got one.
Yes.
Well, that's my understanding. If I've told you untruth, then.
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you, Councillor Posnett.
Up when they are serious breaches of the conditions.
Director Pranali wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm that Councillor Posnett is correct. We did not have, we had a half a post for planning enforcement officer that has been increased to one full-time post, and we have just recruited that just a few weeks ago. So the new person is in post, and we have started preparing a more proactive schedule for enforcement action. So yes, things have been lapsed, but following the audit report, those actions have been put in place. Council did approve the additional resources, and we hope that in the next few months you will see the results and improved performance in that area.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my ward, just to go on from this, and I think we ought to bring it up. I know this is standards audit and standards meeting, but some of the planners have been getting at somebody in my ward who has actually got all their plans, have had them for years and years, and they're saying they haven't. They've actually had them for 40 years. And I think it's discrimination against somebody, a young woman who is doing her utmost best. And so if you're going to get people actually not doing the job that they probably should be doing and discriminating against a woman, I think it's terrible. And
Thank you for that, Councillor. I think it doesn't fall within the remit of the annual report. I suggest you take it up with the head of service outside the meeting, but thank you for bringing that to our attention. Councillor Douglas.
Yes, just building on to my previous question a little bit. First of all, I'd like to say what a really good report this is, very useful, a really good summary from the chair, and it's never been done before, I understand, but I found it really helpful and refreshing as well. Obviously, you've been very busy post-COVID, and that's really good to see. So yes, congratulations to that all round. And about the quarterly meetings as well, the inclusion of that looks really good. And the points at 4.7, the key points of summary from the previous year was useful. Pleased to see the compliance with CIPFA, CIPFA, and the financial management code there. which I know when I was chair, I was looking out for and waiting to see. So that's really a relief after the COVID lockdowns and the COVID aftermaths. And I think you've done very good work to get that done. So I'm just wondering, because this is an annual report, and it's dated the 31st of August 2022, can we assume that there will be another one in March? Because obviously you're doing some good work there. Be interesting to see, following forwards, what else is achieved. Thank you.
During the year, if it's approved tonight and then goes to full council, some of the actions are underway, and then the rest will start, and there will be progress, if necessary, progress report. But there will be another report. The annual report will be in August to be done at that stage.
That's fine. I can understand that slight staggered approach. It does help. Thank you.
There was one thing in the report that I would pick up and note is number 4.81 on page 12, the difficulties locally and nationally with the external audit service and the comments on the way forward. And the director is working as best we can with it is not at this end, it is at the external auditor's end, and I would wish to make that point on that 4.81. Because the annual accounts is a significant part of our work responsibility on that one. Yeah. Any other comments?
Happy to propose a recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Wilkinson. Do we have a seconded councillor?
Councillor Douglas, thank you.
We show our show of hands. Councillor Holmes, are you? Thank you. Sorry, I can't see. Thank you. Agenda item 5. I'll hand over to Rachel Ashley-Corn, the Chief Internal Auditor, to provide a brief introduction to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the latest update on the delivery of the internal audit plan for the current financial year. So as members will be familiar with the format, I'll just briefly run through the key updates. So from page 27 of the papers this evening, there is a copy of the current year's internal audit plan and the status of each of the assignments as at the time of producing this report for the committee. As you'll note from the report, we have finalised a further 5 audit reports since the last committee meeting. So as usual, these are summarised for you in section 2.5 in terms of the scope and the key findings of those reviews. So those, as I say, as section 2.5, we've got the first of those was in relation to fixed assets. So the council needs to make sure that its records around its fixed assets, where we look at property, plant and equipment effectively, is robust, so that it suitably informs the council statement of accounts, and also that we can exercise due control over the acquisition, disposal and valuation of our assets. So we wanted to seek assurance over the completeness of our records and the controls that are operating in this area. So I'm pleased to say that based on sample testing of acquisitions and disposals that we looked at as part of the audit, we confirmed compliance with the expected controls in those areas. We also confirmed the controls around the maintenance of the fixed asset register, and we were happy with the procedures in place for the valuation of assets and making sure that we provide a due level of professional challenge and insight into those as well to make sure they're suitably informed. We also conducted some physical verification testing. So we literally went round and just identified some of the assets, made sure that those that had been recorded on the register were in fact in place, and made sure that any others that we saw were matched back to the register as well. And that didn't identify any discrepancies. So we were happy with the accuracy of those records. So there were no significant findings arising from the audit and a good level of assurance overall. Moving on to the second audit was in relation to special expenses. So again, this is another one which focuses very much around the accounts and how we account for different spend. This is special expenses is in relation to expenditure on services we are delivering, which would usually in other circumstances be delivered by a town or a parish council. So we have some instances of that within Melton Borough Council. The ways in which this needs to be accounted for and handled is in accordance with the Local Government Finance Act. So we wanted to seek assurance as part of this audit around compliance with that legislation and the relevant policies that we have in place as well as an organisation. So the testing that we performed confirmed that the budget's income and expenditure were suitably recorded, and they'd all been accounted for in accordance with the definition that had been put into place for this area in terms of special expenses. We have recommended that when the council goes through its budget setting process for 23-24, it would be a timely opportunity to review that definition and make sure we're fully complying with that and making sure that that's suitable going forward, just as an opportunity to refresh that. But overall, no significant areas of concern and nothing to report to the committee, and only low levels of recommendation to address any areas for improvement. The third was in relation to the housing repairs contract. So this is something that I have reported on in previous years to the audit committee. It's obviously one of your key contracts as an organisation, so we wanted to make sure we've got good, robust controls operating over this, both to make sure we're delivering on the objectives that we expect the contractor to provide, but also in terms of the invoice payment process as well. So for this audit, we very much focused on a follow-up of findings from the audit report that was issued in 2020-21. And we also looked specifically at sample testing on invoices that had been paid during the last 12 months, just to make sure that we are complying with the expected controls in that area. So based on the findings of the work that we performed, we're happy that progress has been made since the last audit. Perhaps not in all areas have not been fully completed as yet. So we're only able to confirm that of the 10 recommendations that were made in that audit, 2 of those are fully completed and we have closed them on our records. But the others all remain a work in progress. And based on the testing and the work that we've conducted, we're happy that there is work underway in all of these areas, and they are progressing in the right direction. So we will continue to follow those up with management on a monthly basis. Members of the committee will also note that further on in the overdue audit recommendations, some of those actions are flagged as some of those are overdue by more than 3 months. So we've got that visibility for you as a committee to make sure that those are being tracked. We also did, as I say, the invoice testing, which has improved greatly from when we first performed the audit 2 years ago. But again, there's still scope for improvement around the audit trail for the approval of variations and amendments to orders as well. So we have given an improved assurance opinion. It does remain at satisfactory, and due to the size of the contract and the importance of this area, we have given a moderate organisational risk overall until those remaining actions are fully completed. So it's a good direction of travel, but there's still work to be done in some areas. The next report is on licensing. So this was looking at the overall delivery of the licensing service, which obviously covers a number of different types of licenses. And we wanted really to seek assurance over making sure the council's complying with its legal requirements and the regulations and controls we'd expect to be applied in this area. We also did some specific testing around safeguarding checks, because obviously some of the licenses that we issue relate to taxi drivers, and making sure we're doing due checks to ensure it's suitable persons are appointed into those licenses. So based on the sample testing that we performed, which was over more than a 12-month period, we looked at a sample of licenses of various types, and we were happy that actually the controls that were in place for the processing, the verification and issuing of licenses were working effectively. We didn't identify any significant concerns there, with only minor omissions overall. What we did identify, however, were some areas where we do need to address certain gaps to make sure that we're fully complying with our requirements under the Licensing Act. One of those is to make sure we are suitably publishing our licensing register on our website, which hopefully is something that can be addressed fairly swiftly. We've also identified that renewal reminders as well needed to be tightened up to make sure we've got a consistent process in place for that, to make sure those are being dealt with in a timely manner. Ultimately, the key finding, though, from the audit was that the council does not currently have a planned programme of inspection and enforcement checks. And as a result of that, that did impact on our overall assurance opinion, because whilst we may have good controls in place, if the enforcement function isn't operating, it undermines the effectiveness of the service. So that's why overall we were only able to give a limited assurance opinion in terms of the design of the control environment as it currently stands. And obviously the director's here to take any questions on that, given that it's a below a satisfactory assurance rating in terms of that control environment. As I said, in terms of the processing of licenses, we were happy those were operating effectively, but very much comes down to making sure we have a robust enforcement process in place. So, as I say, limited assurance on design, satisfactory for compliance, and a moderate organisational risk again until those actions are completed. Did you want to pause there, Chair, for the Director to comment on that, or did you want me to move on to the next audit report?
You continue, please.
Okay, no problem. So moving on to landlord health and safety. Again, I know this is a key priority for the committee. It's obviously one of our biggest risks as a local authority with housing stock. We need to make sure that all of our housing properties are being subject to suitable checks to ensure they are safe from a gas perspective, from a electrical installation perspective, and various other requirements in terms of asbestos and passenger lifts and all of these various safety checks that we'd expect to be completed. So obviously members will recall this was an area where we did identify some gaps in previous years. A lot of work has been invested in this area, and that was evident when we performed the audit this time. Based on the sample testing that we conducted, 100% of the properties that we selected randomly across the board had all of the checks in place that we expected to see, and they were fully evidenced on file. We were also able to see where remedial actions had been identified, that there was an audit trail to ensure that those had been suitably resolved as well. It is noted that there continue to be some gaps, mainly due to difficulties in gaining access to certain properties. But I was very reassured that these have been suitably flagged. They are subject to regular monitoring, and there's effective performance reporting in place, which provides full visibility over those, and there's work underway to try to address those remaining gaps. So I'm really pleased to report that this resulted in a substantial assurance opinion for the design of the control environment, which reflects a great deal of work that's been completed in this area, and a good level of compliance with minor organisational risks. There were no significant areas at all to flag to the committee for concern or further recommendation. So that is a run through of those 5 reports. As I say, the full summaries are provided in your papers. Also within the report is an update on the implementation of audit recommendations, where we've identified areas for improvement. Since the last committee meeting, we have confirmed that 23 audit recommendations have been fully completed, and a table covering these is provided on page 13 of the appendix. At the time of reporting, we do still have 26 actions which were overdue. Of those, there are 3 that fall into the category of being high priority and over 3 months overdue. Hence, I've given you full details of those in Appendix 3. With the latest update from officers as well. So I won't go through all of those in detail. They are actions that we've brought to you previously, so we've now got the latest updates on those provided. 2 of those relate to the housing repairs contract that I've mentioned. We've just audited again, so we do have the latest updates on those. In terms of the first action, I do understand from the director as well that the service charges review will also be informing the work on this intensive housing management service review. So I'm assured that that is ongoing and the work is progressing in that area. So I think that's a quick run through, Chair, of the key areas, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Would it be best to invite the director to speak on the licensing, and then members come in after that, if you're okay? Thank you. Director.
Thank you, Chair. As the audit identifies, licensing is a key statutory function for the council. We have just wanted to remind members that this audit was done earlier in the year, around July, August time. And since then, significant changes have taken place within this service area. Again, just like planning enforcement, the licensing enforcement resource has been doubled from half FTE to now full post in place, and that work on proactive enforcement plan as well as scheduling of licensing enforcement activities has commenced. I can also assure you that the work is underway on publishing the licensing register as well as key reports online. And it's not due to the lack of effort or lack of information available. The team does have the register. It's the technical hitch in understanding the IT, the software system that produces the reports, and its accessibility issues which are required for publishing any of information on the website, because we are audited heavily on the legality of accessibility. So we are making sure that the IT system we have currently that produces the right kind of information, which is in the accessible format, that can be published on the website. So the information does exist. It's not in the accessible format, which is the bit we are working on currently with the help of IT officers, as well as the licensing team, working with the communications team with legal support. So it's a corporate organization-wide effort, and we hope to find a solution soon enough on that. So it's a work in progress. But apart from that, all of the actions that identified by the audit report are very much underway in terms of progress, and we hope to meet all the agreed timescales in implementing the actions.
Thank you, Director. Over to members. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Given that the audit assessment took place earlier in the year, when is the next one due on this particular service area, Rachel?
Through you, Chair. Yep. Oh, okay. Shall I answer? Is that okay? Yep, sorry.
Certainly,
Sorry,
certainly,
thank you, Chair.
Rachel.
Yes, so just to confirm, it's not a cyclical audit that we perform on a regular basis. So obviously one of the other items we have on the agenda this evening is the audit plan. So if members of the committee were minded to request an audit for next year to follow up on the recommendations, given that it was a limited assurance, that would be quite standard to request that. So we can certainly schedule that in for next year if that was a priority area for the audit plan for next year. So I'm happy to discuss that further.
I think it's fair to say that when we built the plan up for this year, 2022-23, licensing was put in because it was an ideal opportunity with a retirement of an officer to take stock of what's good and what needs doing. So that was and it's been proved fruitful. Councillor Douglas.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As Chair of Licensing, I do feel obliged to comment on the licensing section, starting on page 23. I was pleased to see this report. I welcomed it very much. Obviously, we've had a senior officer leave the department, and it was an ideal time, as you say, to look at it. And I think the licensing actually had gone on very well for years. It was robust, it was working well, it was successful overall. Some would say we did not necessarily need this, but I think we can never afford to be too complacent, and the results have proved that there are always points to kind of tighten up on, such as the licensing register, and I'm pleased to hear from Pranali that they're still trying to tighten that up even more. Pleased to see that the private hire operators have had their DBS checks on their own staff. That was important. The license renewal reminders needed issuing. That was an area that did need tightening up. If they didn't renew, they would lose their license. It was just assumed they would renew, but you know, it doesn't hurt to renew, to issue reminders beforehand to save people forgetting. I was going to actually ask how the current situation is regarding the full-time officer for the enforcement of the licensing, because you find staffing is constantly in a bit of flux these days, particularly in local government. Can Pranali help with that current issue as in now? Thank you.
Certainly.
So yes, it's very much a linked response with the planning enforcement. So we had one person doing both planning enforcement as well as licensing enforcement until recently, but now with the planning enforcement full-time person in place, the previous role has been transferred into focused fully on the licensing enforcement. So it's a recent change, literally in the last few weeks, that a full-time increase, like 0.5 increase from half a post to full post has happened. So the proactive actions about putting the licensing policy, enforcement policy in place, the licensing enforcement register in place, and the scheduling of proactive actions over the year, that is now started, and we hope to see that completed within the next couple of months.
Thank you. That is clarifying. So we've actually got somebody in that role, or we're not actually recruiting. We do have somebody in place.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Douglas. Councillor Chan.
Can I take it that the enforcement officer actually tours the rural pubs? Because there is a lot of after hours drinking taking place. And there's great concern. I mean, Councillor Pritchett and I have spoken to the police about this. And we get it. I mean, we've got a track that's well used at 2 o'clock in the morning. And we did have an enforcement officer, I can't remember her name, but she was brilliant. She used to sit in Bottisford till 2 o'clock in the morning on her own. I don't know how she dared do it, but she did. And she nabbed no end, and she cut it out, but it's back again. Thank you.
So yes, very much so. It is part of the proactive actions we will be taking. Of course, it will be resource intensive, and we will need to understand the frequency or how effectively we use that resource. It's still, while we have increased the resource, it's still one person and one full-time post only. But yes, that kind of proactive enforcement on pubs is very much on the agenda. So.
Thank you very much. Can I ask a question, please? In circumstances where we might be short-staffed, under considerable pressure, I don't want to delve into the planning enforcement, but it's a point of principle. How does it work here with your departmental risk registers, prioritising the work, agreeing what can't be done and reporting it up to get agreement? And then where does the portfolio holder sit in all this? Because some of this seems to come as a shock to us. I think it's fair to say when it comes out, you know, you have to make a decision and prioritise, you know, what you're going to enforce and not. Now, how does it all work?
So the service risk registers do identify resource issues on each service area. And as you can imagine, most services are stretched and we are doing a lot with the resource available. We can always do more in any service area, isn't it, if we had more resources, but we have to understand what is available and what is possible to achieve with the available resources. So each service risk register does identify resource issues wherein as and where it's identified. It does get escalated to departmental register, and if it is a corporate issue, then it does get added to corporate risk register. So the process is in place. This is not a shock because we have been talking about the adding resources to enforcement in well, all three areas of planning, licensing, as well as environmental enforcement for a while. If you remember, councillors, 3 years ago, we did not have any enforcement positions within the council. We did create one and a half post a couple of years ago to look after all three areas, but we realized it wasn't enough. And again, that was identified through this kind of risk assessments of each services. And that's why this additional resource have been added. And that assessment has been in line with the audit recommendations as well. So audit recommendations haven't been surprising. We knew there was an issue. We have been working on it. We have added resources, and we will keep monitoring the effectiveness of those new resources going forward.
Thank you. Final question I've got on that is, do you document your meetings with the portfolio holder, and would it have been documented? and an agreement, you've told them that this can't be done. Does it get to that stage with the portfolio holder?
You mean, are there any minutes taken with the portfolio holder meetings? No, because there are literally on weekly, sometimes twice a weekly basis, depending on the issues we talk about. So no, I haven't got record of my meetings or notes with my portfolio holders on regular basis. If that's what the portfolio holder prefers going forward, we can, I'm sure, manage and facilitate that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Holmes.
I'm sure that several of us that have been on licensing committees have not been terribly happy about the things that have happened. We have had to go along with things, but I have a conscience, and I'm sure we all do. When licensing was in the courts, then they had more teeth than we have. So is it not imperative that we always have an enforcement officer for licensing? Because if something happens, we can have only got the guidelines with which we can go within. And if we don't have, well, apparently we've got one at the moment, but surely if anything did happen, and I think we all know where we're talking about, really difficult decisions we've had to make as in licensing. So who is liable if something does happen? Are we, or because I think that it is vitally important that we do have these officers up front there. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because there's some, but there's been some very difficult ones. I won't mention any cases, but they could be, some of these could be life and death matters. So so it's not us that's in that are if we have to give these licenses, which we're often not happy about, but we have to do it. So it doesn't come down to us, it'll come down to the council, will it? And I think it is imperative that we always have an officer.
Thank you for that. I think what Councillor Holmes is saying, it's a good point. What in all this we're not doing, when things we're not doing, what is the risk? What is the risk to the public? What is the risk in terms of money or reputation to ourselves out of this? I think that's what you're saying, is it? Yeah.
So first of all, there is not anything which we statutorily should be doing that we are not doing. So we are doing all that is required of us to do. We may not be doing more proactive actions in terms of enforcement, but when there is a complaint or there is an issue identified or reported to us, we have always taken action. So I'm not aware of any specific things that we should be doing that we are not doing. And the audit report hasn't identified any of those actions either, that we are not doing anything. So I'm not sure what exactly we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman, it was one on appeal, that's what I'm saying. And that's why we're very concerned about it.
I think it was a very good question, and thank you very much for giving us some comfort on that. Wish to speak, Director?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think we do have insurance as well. Is that potentially what you're looking at? So we do have professional indemnity insurance as well. So I mean, in specific cases, you'd have to look at whether that covered a particular circumstance and negligence, etc. But we do have, as I say, professional indemnity insurance.
I just come back. It's not that we're trying to do anything wrong. We're trying to keep within the perimeters. And this particular one has gone to appeal and they've won, and it is quite a worrying thing. That's where really I'm coming.
So what you're saying is, just to sum up finally, all the things that we're legally required to do, we are doing. and the other work is risk assessed. So the priorities are being met at the moment, but there are some gaps after that that's to be filled in. I think if there's no more questions for the director, we can let the director go for tonight, I think. Thank you very much, Director Parikh. Now we can invite you to ask questions on the other reports. If there's no questions on the other reports, if the members are agreeable, I'd like to pass our thanks on for the positive to the staff for the positive fixed assets and the progress being made in the housing reports as well. I should like to pass that on. And as Rachel said, it's a journey going along the road. So thank you very much for that. I think there's a recommendation now that the committee note the report and progress made by the internal audit team in delivery of the audit plan. Can we confirm it's been noted? Thank you very much. Item 6 on the agenda, internal audit plan. Rachel again will provide a brief introduction to this report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is looking ahead to the next financial year. So the work that the internal audit team will be delivering for you from the 1st of April 23. So I just wanted to bring this initial paper to the committee just to inform you on the process that we'll be following to develop your internal audit plan, which will ultimately come to this committee in March for formal review and approval so that we can make a start at the start of the new financial year. So briefly, the report sets out the process that we will follow to compile the draft audit plan for your consideration. So it's making sure that it's a suitably risk-based internal audit plan. So it's delivered in accordance with the public sector internal audit standards. And then we're making sure that all of the audits we're delivering add value. So we're not duplicating with other sources of assurance, and we're making the best possible use of our time. So ultimately, we'll be looking at things like council risk registers, looking at corporate plans and service delivery plans, looking at coverage from our own internal audit work during the last few years to see whether there's anything we may need to drill into further or something that may be worth revisiting. As was mentioned earlier, it may be that it would be useful for us to revisit some of the areas of limited assurance. As we have with some of the reports that we've talked about this evening, these are areas where we had received limited assurance in the past, and we've then followed that journey through and been able to ensure that the committee gets the assurance that the actions are being taken forward appropriately, but also that they're suitably embedded and they're actually effective as well. So it may be considering areas like that. It's also looking at things that we haven't covered in the last few years. So key processes, key service areas. Obviously, we included licensing this year as an area that we hadn't audited for a few years. So that's the type of coverage that we'll be looking to deliver. I will be consulting with all of the members of senior leadership team to look at their risk registers and understand their priorities for the next 12 months. And one of the key stages is to consult with this committee as well as the audit committee within your remit to inform that audit planning process as well. So that's the other reason for bringing this to you tonight, is to also encourage any feedback on any areas you would like me to feed into that process. Obviously, I can't say that anything that's raised will definitely go onto the plan because it will then feed into that risk assessment process. And it may be that we have other sources of assurance around that risk and we'd need to map that out. But I would encourage any areas to be highlighted. And again, if you don't want to highlight everything tonight, I'm happy to receive anything after the meeting, ideally to myself and the chair, and we can feed that into that process as well. So thank you, Chair. I think that's a quick overview of that paper.
There will be a memorandum coming out as last year inviting you to submit subjects. It will go to the chairs of committee and the cabinet as well. And everything that came in last year came in various routes through me to Rachel through Dawn. And there was a list, and there was a considerable process of vetting that list, firstly between the director and the chief internal auditor. Then I was involved in going through a validation process of what was in and what was out and what we could look at in another way. So you'll be invited to look at that. Any questions? If there's no questions on this, then can I confirm that the committee notes the proposed approach to developing the audit plan for 2023-24, and that will highlight any risk areas where the committee requires assurance during the year ahead. Can I confirm that we've noted it? Thank you. Thank you. Noted. Item 7, independent review into the oversight of local audit and the transparency of local authority financial reporting, often known in its shortened form, the Redmond Review. And over to the Director.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So the report provides the committee with an update on the Redmond Review into the local audit of councils. Appendix A provides the latest position on the recommendations that were contained within the review. And there's a number of areas where legislation is required before these are implemented. The key areas of impact for this council are set out in paragraph 5.6. I will highlight, following what the Chair mentioned about the difficulties with external audit, that audit fees continue to rise, and early indications are for a 150% increase in audit fees from the start of newly awarded audit contracts, which are applicable from the 2023-24 accounts onwards. Whether this will be covered by a new pardons payment or not remains to be seen, so adding more pressure to the council's budget. The deadlines for the accounts have again been revised and again extended, but due to auditor availability, we continue to have difficulties in getting our audited accounts finalised, and we still have our 2021 accounts still to be finalised, and also no indication of when the audit on the 21-22 accounts will commence. And that's the situation replicated across a lot of councils, particularly the ones with the auditors that we have as well, who seem to be particularly affected. The first annual report of the committee was considered this evening, and that's ahead of the legislative requirement in that area. And the other main requirement relates to the membership of committees, and this will be progressed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. I'll invite members to ask any questions. The Posnet.
Well, it's only really just a question for Dawn. So if we're having problems with the auditor we've got, can we not choose to change that auditor? Or is it something that we've got the auditors we're given, sort of thing?
You can object. You can object when they're initially allocated because you get a period of consultation, and we've actually already been notified that in 23-24 we've got a new auditor. I'm not sure whether you can object mid-term. The thing is that other councils with other auditors are having problems as well. Ours seems particularly bad locally because there's been some sickness issues at their end as well. I also think as well, having heard the new auditors that we've got, remains to be seen. You also have a period of pain from both sides as well when you have a change of auditor, as they get used to your systems and understand your authority as well. So it's not a pain-free process changing auditors either.
The Chandler.
I think it's a problem throughout accountancy. I mean, we use a local firm here, chartered accountants. They're all over the East Midlands. Took the books in July, promised them back in 6 weeks. We're still waiting. And I mean, it's diabolical. I mean, had to chase my tax up 3 times before I got it back. Then it was wrong. They send it on some convoluted thing on the computer that I can't get it off. But no, I think the whole profession's in a mess.
On this one, I met the new, who will be the new head of the service for Grant Thornton on Monday at an East Midlands Audit Chairs Forum in Leicester. And the fee increase, I think, did we have it at the last meeting, or there's a fee increase because of the new arrangements, and they're looking to recruit and provide a dedicated team and a lot stronger team out of the new arrangements. And interestingly, prior to the last 10 years, he was a senior manager in the district audit service. So I had a full briefing of their approach to external audit and look into the future on Monday. So that was quite useful. If there's no other questions, can I confirm that we've noted the report? Thank you, members. Noted. Director, again, the risk management annual report. And there are attachments. On this one, we actually approve at the end of all this, we approve the updated risk management policy, which is in Appendix A, but we note the risk register at B and the introductory report.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this is your regular annual report, as well as your usual 6-monthly update on risk management activities, and also the update to the register and action plans. We've also got this time, as the Chair has mentioned, an updated risk management policy and strategy for consideration and hopefully approval. So the policy was due for review. There was no particular reason why, other than the fact that it was 3 years since we'd last looked at that. And we reviewed it with Zurich Municipal, our insurers and risk management advisors. The review of the policy concentrated on strengthening and enhancing the policy rather than a major overhaul. And that followed good feedback from the review by ZM, but also following the internal audit that we had last year. We also had training, if members may recall, earlier on in the year, and that fed into the review as well. So we took feedback from that. I appreciate there's a lot of detail in the report covering the risk register and also movement since the last 6-monthly review. And I won't go into that in detail, but I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry to be facetious, but are we not supposed to be able to read this? On page 92, the risk register, it's so small that I just don't need glasses. I need a magnifying glass as well. Are we not supposed to be able to read this? Is this, it's minute.
Thank you for raising that
Page
one.
90 and there's another one, 91 and 92. Not so bad on 90, but
Much for raising that one.
thank you.
I'm going to make it my New Year's resolution that where we have previously have small print, maps from the planning department you can't read as well, coloured charts that are put to black and white, that we can go forward with the members getting the best of information. So I do take that on board, Councillor Holmes. The Posnet.
On that same subject, and I do totally agree with you, I've been getting notifications of, what can I say? Oh, applications, say planning applications. And for some reason, they're using a different type of script that I just literally cannot read. When I went back to Adam to say, I don't know what you've done to alter this script, but I cannot read it. And he said, it's the usual script you have sent. Well, I'm sorry, it wasn't.
I think I need to raise this outside the meeting, the whole gambit. And there are other issues about discrimination against people who are partially sighted and other reasons who have issues. Sorry, Councillor Wilkinson, I didn't see you.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the risk register, I wonder whether the proposed strategic partnership with Harbour District Council should be added, because that has potential risks, doesn't it?
Yes, Director Dawn will answer that.
Yeah, if I could come back to me. I mean, I do apologise. This report was initially on the September meeting, which was delayed. But that aside, you'll see in the report to Cabinet, there's a full risk assessment of the strategic partnership, quite detailed, quite lengthy. And then once, depending on the outcome, obviously, of your decision in council in December, ultimately, that risk assessment will be taken and then added as appropriate into service risk registers and also the strategic risk register if that's appropriate, and also into the associated project documentation as we progress the partnership as well. So we've already started talking about that.
Thank you, Director. Any other questions? Councillor Holmes?
Thank you. So, so something has been, it's sort of, it sprung into my mind. So we're talking about risk. A lot of us have been at risk because we have a cabinet system. Shouldn't have a cabinet system until you've got 80,000 population. We've never had that. We'd only got about 50 when it started. Now we could.
That's a separate matter with respect rather than
Well,
the risk register.
Well, it's a register. I'm just saying it's a register, and so ought we to look into this for the next council, because in May it could stop and it could go back to committee system, and it's a risk. It's a risk for everybody.
Cabinet's a risk, or it's a risk that it's going back to a committee. I think it's some risks either way, but I'm not necessarily sure that we can delve into that one now. Got a couple of questions for you here, Director. Could you explain to us the paragraph 5.3.7? Explain the risks involved in the rent cap and the background to 5.38 IT, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So 5.3.7 and the rent cap. Yes. So at the time of writing this, I think it's been finalised now. The government did a consultation around imposing a rent cap. So social rents are allowed to rise by RPI plus 1%. But the rent cap would, because obviously that would be a really high amount because of the inflation. So the consultation on a rent cap was saying they wanted to introduce a cap so that it wouldn't be RPI plus 1%, and they were consulting, if I remember correctly, on something like 1%, 3% and 5%. I can't remember the exact numbers. And the risk to the housing revenue account and the business plan is obviously, of course, our business plan, which we've just approved, was based on RPI plus 1%. And the concern was if that cap was so low, it could undermine the viability of the business plan, because you don't just lose that income for 1 year, you lose that ability for the whole life of the plan going forward. As it happens, I think the rent cap is 7%, which is a higher amount than was consulted on. And obviously when members see the reports that come to council, I think the view is it takes a lot of resource out of the housing revenue account, but it doesn't undermine the viability, and that was the risk. Sorry, you also asked about 538. Yeah. Okay. So in January this year, so we're in the Leicestershire ICTP partnership, which is a service provided by Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council to Melton and Blaby, previously also to Oadby and Wigston. That was a contracted out service, but from the beginning of January, there was reports to council, cabinet, etc. That service moved to an in-house service provision. So Hinckley and Bosworth from the 1st of January employed the staff direct, and the contractor moved away from the service. Staff were 2p'd over. Unfortunately, what happened, as is the sort of thing that does happen anyway, following that move to an in-house service, a lot of those engineers left and moved on to other jobs elsewhere, which left a very depleted service. It was also found that a lot of the documentation wasn't in place that should have been, which was part of the reason why we were bringing that in-house. So the service has struggled. It's struggled to recruit. It's now virtually up to full capacity with the resources, but it does continue to struggle with that lack of documentation, and that's all starting to be addressed. And that was the reason the service was brought in-house, and we knew there would be that pain to get through before we've got a good service going forward.
Osnett.
Well, I can say I don't think it is a good service, because I've got people on my email account who they don't work in Melton Borough Council, but I've always been able to send emails to them and they're refusing to send them. So when I contacted them to ask them why they were not sending that and why they were not giving me emails that other councillors had sent me, that was a fortnight ago, and I'm still waiting for an answer. So, I mean, I just find it really, really strange. I mean, I know security's got to be good, and I'm not disputing that, but I don't open emails that I don't know who they're from. I have far too many emails to want to read rubbish that I've not asked for anyway. So, I mean, I delete them. I mean, I had an email last week, but on the county one, from the Chief Constable of the Met, saying that due to some internet investigations, they'd found out that I was involved with child pornography. And if I didn't reply to that email, they were coming to arrest me.
Are you waiting still?
Well, yeah, I'm still waiting. I thought I'd have some nice young policemen come, but no. But do you know what I mean? I mean, that was on my county one. And I know they've had trouble with county recently because at the weekend, there was a cyber attack, tried to get onto it, but it didn't actually succeed. But there has been a few issues with our system since then. But this is basically Melton one. And, you know, and they send me emails. This, you know, do not open this email unless you know what it's from. And it clearly says from less.gov.uk or, you know, or NBC, you know, that sort of thing. But then I have to, you know, sort of open it because I know who it's from.
Director.
So what the report actually says, it doesn't say it's a good service. What it says is the risk is higher than it was because the service is experiencing issues because of that lack of documentation. Also as well, because of the inherent risk in IT systems at the moment, they're improving the infrastructure. And one of the things that they're certainly improving is the firewall and also the spam filter. We've been changing our spam filter. I think there's not one council that's probably not had some kind of risk or scare around some kind of cyber security. So we do have to be really careful, and we all accept it's very frustrating, but not everyone is as careful at looking at what they get. And it only takes a second to just be distracted and open an email. And we have had issues internally as well. But what I can say is afterwards, if you can give me the details, I'll escalate it for you and try and get that sorted.
When we have a new officer or member of staff, unless he has been put on the system and you try and email them, it just bounces back to you as if they don't exist. So you then, so like I physically, like say it was you, Dawn, and I knew you just started, I wanted to ask you something and it bounced back to me. I would then have to go into my, whatever you call it, system, and then put in myself your contact details, and hopefully I'd be able to send the next email to you.
Some quirks about being able to cope with pictures as well. So I've sent some pictures of some planning stuff and it's not yet been received, but the director has. Any other questions on the report? I thought it was a very good report, the papers throughout. The questions that I've got is for next year, when the annual report is done, there could be an opportunity to give credit to the work that the scrutiny committee have done in pointing things out. You know, they do an annual report and they've sort of that's their part of their remit is to deal with that one. The other one is page 76. The role of internal audit is too narrow. It says that they've used the risk register, but the internal audit can actually review the whole of the risk management arrangements, including our performance on that one. And then the other one that I'm going to have to take up outside the meeting is I'm struggling to understand why planning isn't a corporate risk. I'm struggling with that one because I'm on the planning committee and I'm struggling with that one, and I need to go and meet with the director on their various processes. Speak, Councillor
Yeah,
Wilson.
I'd agree with you, Chair. The appeals that are coming in left, right and centre, and the costs associated to those appeals, I think, are a concern, and it should be a risk, a corporate risk, because there are so many, the volume of them are coming through.
I mean, the risks are that we build something we shouldn't do. There's costs all round. You know, there's costs not just at the appeal if we don't defend it properly. There's also aspects of the law, one being ecology. There's quite a number of things. And those of us that are on the planning committee, are you Councillor Posnick, are you in agreement with me?
Yeah, I am in agreement with you, but one problem we've got are the planning inspectors. Their inconsistency. And just because, you know, one thing that planning members want, yes, we've got things that we have to fulfill and we have to do. But changes to some of the plans we want, because most of the new developments in this town are like car parks. You can't get round them because everybody's parking on the road. But of course the planning inspector doesn't agree with us, and they don't always come from Bristol. They Google, you know, so there is that. I mean, I know the planning process is being reviewed. Michael Gove's doing that, and they're also looking at the planning inspectorate. So there could be a change of
range of risks from what Councillor Wilkinson has first said, right the way through to an adjournment, basically because the cost of a what we call it, deferment because of the reports. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on that, is the local planner risk, given that the review is due to take place within the next year or so? Is that a risk to the council?
Review's already started.
Through you, Chair. I mean, again, I can't answer that because it'd be down for the service to assess that. I mean, here you've got the strategic risk register. Some of those things you're mentioning, certainly I know there was a discussion about planning and appeals, and I can't verbatim remember the debate and why it wasn't put on there, but it's certainly on the service risk register, the same as the local plan. I'm sure it's on the service risk register, but it'll be down to how high that's assessed in terms of likelihood and the impact of that, and whether that makes it onto the strategic risk register. But as the chairman said, he's going to speak to the director and look at the departmental risk registers.
Before I hand over to Councillor Chandler, we had a draft governance statement that had planning on it, and it seems out of kilter to have something serious on the governance statement but not on the the other point on that one is that I'm not aware that the timetable to 2025 or whatever it is a problem, but on my list of risks we've got reliance on one officer, so that's along my long list of risks. Councillor Chandler.
If I can just comment on both the last 2 points that have been brought up. The local plan, Councillor Holmes and I are both on. It was appointed last May at the AGM. We've met once in September, and that is all. And there's no meeting in the diary as a follow-up. And we obviously, I think most of us on that local plan subcommittee are all finishing in May. We've given notice that we're finishing, so I'm not very happy with that, because as I led on the local plan, as you well know, and there were several comments that I have made to the officer who's leading on it, but we don't appear to be getting anywhere. We seem to be backtracking, if anything. And the other thing is to go, Councillor Wilkinson's comment about appeals. You and I sat in on an appeal in our ward a matter of months, 6 weeks ago. And I mean, I've had to make a complaint because the officers' reports was, and half the officers didn't turn up. I mean, that was diabolical. I mean, you've got to have your lead officers there. If your conservation officer can't turn up when it's in a conservation area, and you had nobody to speak on heritage at all. I mean, it was heritage as well as conservation. He didn't turn up. One of the lead planners didn't come into, she wasn't there for the beginning of the meeting. I mean, I can go on. I mean, we've made complaints about it because it was adjourned in the end. I mean, I think the inspector was losing his rag over it because it was so
Yeah, I
badly
think,
handled.
yeah, that's the whole, I think there's an issue about the local plan is that firstly, we've got retiring people in election, and we've got people who've been coming to committees for years and dealing with the one inch thick local plan, neighbourhood plans, who are in an ideal position to contribute, that it will be lost if we don't contribute our list of thoughts before May. And it is important that they are able to do it. And I suspect when you've got one person doing it and they're dealing with the road, and then something else, it's not progressing. So I've made a note of that, Councillor Chandler. And any other comments on risk? Can we move on to the recommendations? 2.1. The committee approves the updated risk management policy and strategy as attached at Appendix A. 2.2 notes the content of the report and the updated strategic risk register and associated risk management action plan as attached at Appendix B. So, can we have a show of hands, please, that are in favour? And that's both, I reckon. It looks unanimous. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ken. Agenda item 9. Kieran Stockley, the monitoring officer, is now to join us remotely to provide a brief update of the Regulation of Investigative Powers Act update. It's known as RIPA. So over to Kieran Stockley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for accommodating me remotely this evening. This report seeks to provide an update to members in relation to the Council's use of RIPA from April 21 to March 22. Members will be aware that RIPA sets out a regulatory framework for the use of covert investigatory techniques by public authorities, and an annual report is presented to the Audit and Standards Committee. We are limited to using 3 types of covert techniques, which are detailed in your reports at paragraph 4.2, and they're generally used for the purpose of preventing or detecting crime. Use of those techniques has to be authorised internally by a trained authorising officer and only used when considered necessary, proportionate, and as a last resort. The use of RIPA powers, as you'll have heard from previous reports that I've presented, has declined considerably, and the Council has not had to rely on RIPA during 21-22. Despite this, it's essential that we keep our processes and procedures under review. With that in mind, we have taken the opportunity to review the policy, but no changes are proposed at this time. I think it was a year ago, maybe 18 months, that we had an inspection, and there were some proposed changes at that point that came through committee. We still provide training annually. The last lot of training was done almost a year ago on the 7th of December, and we're due for some further training, which should be arranged for early 2023. The recommendations are there in the report to 2.1 and 2.2, and it's to note the update for the period April 21 to March 22, but also approve the reviewed RIPA policy, noting that there are no proposed changes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kieran. Over to members to ask any questions. I have a question, Kieran. Could you give us some examples where we would wish to either A, consider RIPA or would apply for RIPA in the nature of our work?
You're on mute, Kieran.
Thanks, Dawn. Yes, Mr. Chairman, what I was saying was generally we can only use RIPA where the offence that we're investigating carries up to a criminal sentence of up to 6 months. So some of the things that we would investigate which would carry that sort of sentence are things like fly tipping offences, but we would only use covert surveillance methods as a last resort. So we would have to use overt methods as far as possible, but where we felt it was necessary and proportionate to use covert, that's when we would seek a RIPA authorisation.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you, Chair. Just to note that the report, the appendix, is out of date. It lists Keith Aubrey as the Deputy Chief Executive and Director for People and Communities. That's obviously not correct.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. That's clearly my omission. I'll make sure that that's amended before the policy is published.
Adele Wiley, I'm told, as well, is recorded.
I'll make a note of that as well, Mr. Chairman. Apologies.
If there are no other questions, the recommendation is that the committee notes the update for the period April 2021 to March 2022. And we note it and approve it, so with a show of hands. Thank you, anonymous. Kieran Stockley, Monitoring Officer again, for item 10, Members Code of Conduct and Standards update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report seeks to update members on the Members Code of Conduct and also member standards. Following Council's adoption of the new code in December 2021, we've undertaken a review of our operational arrangements to establish whether the procedures that would sit behind the new code were still fit for purpose, effective and in line with the new LGA guidance, the Local Government Association. Feedback from members have confirmed that the arrangement should be clear from both a member and public perspective in terms of what steps are taken when an allegation is received against a member or co-opted member that they fail to comply with the Council's Code of Conduct. So the guidance that we've produced has been produced in line with the LGA's guidance, and the review, sorry, Mr. Chairman, the review has produced those items listed at 5.12 of the report. So we have produced a more user-friendly complaint form, which is designed to assist those who wish to make a complaint, identify the relevant elements and make sure that they provide the relevant details so that we're not having to go back and seek clarity. I just wanted to clarify that any support and guidance that is required by members of the public or another wishing to make a complaint will be provided to anybody, but that also means that they don't have to complete the form if they're not able to. We have started trialling the form with members of the public, but we haven't yet uploaded it to the website as the form until the members of the Audit and Standards Committee have approved it. The feedback to date has been positive. We have also produced a guide to assist councillors and members of the public who have made a complaint and those that are subject to a complaint, and it's created from the LGA's very comprehensive guide that's attached to Appendix 2 of your report. If members are happy with the proposals, then we will also produce a flowchart and provide further clarity on the Council's website on how to make a complaint. The report details various elements of the complaint process. We do a filtering exercise upon receipt of a complaint, and that involves establishing whether the complaint has been made against a current member, whether that member was acting in their capacity at the time or whether it is a private matter. There's a table that has been produced in your reports that takes you through the preliminary stage, and if any one of those jurisdictional tests are not met, then the complaint would not be progressed any further. Following that, you'll find at 5.21 of your reports, we do an initial assessment. That initial assessment is where the subject member of any complaint is notified and they're given the opportunity to provide any representations in response. And then that is then reviewed in line with the independent person for a decision to be taken. If the decision is taken to progress that complaint further, we move to a full investigation where a report is sought, and then following that, it would go to a subcommittee if a resolution was not appropriate at that point, and it's at that point we would have a subcommittee hearing. I've set out the times going forward for complaints at 5.21e of your reports, and then the rest of the report from paragraphs 5.4 onwards provides an annual update on the complaints that were received last year. I'm conscious that we haven't done this type of annual update previously, so going forward it will be much easier to report on the number of complaints, origin of complaints, types of complaints, investigations and the outcomes. And we've also noted at 5.7 of the report some of the lessons learned and improvements that have been made to the process. I think that's sufficient for an introduction, Mr. Chairman. If any members have got any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you very much. Members? Councillor Chandler.
Can I ask here a point of clarification?
Of course.
Do parish councillors have the same code of conduct as we do? When I was a parish councillor, we did, but they appear to stray now. We had the last parish council meeting I attended, one of the members' fathers had a retrospective planning application in, and the member sat there all the time, and when one or two of his colleagues got in a bit of a mess with it, he put them right. He didn't vote, but he put them right. Now, to me, he shouldn't have been in the room, but
well, I can't comment on individual cases. However, when we went through the process of adopting the code of conduct, parish councils were also consulted at that point. And I think, don't quote me off the top of my head, we've got between 30 and 40% of our parish councils that have adopted the same code that we adopted in December. A lot of the other parish councils have come forward and said that they intend to adopt the code, but I haven't received notification. So it depends on which parish council we're talking about, Councillor Chandler. LRAC are supportive of them adopting the same code as the borough council because it just makes it provides consistency across the borough. So we're in the process of obtaining those bits of information where which parish councils have and which parish councils haven't. I haven't received any notification that parish councils won't adopt the code. I think they were waiting for the training that was undertaken in October, so there should be a number of meetings that happen now whereby they're going to adopt the code, the same code as ours.
thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a member of the Constitutional Review Working Group, I'm happy to endorse the update and thank Kira for all the work, because it has been her and the group have been going through this for a little while now, but it's good to see it's coming through.
Particularly pleased in all this process, it's continually reviewed, and that if anybody has difficulty in filling the paperwork in the form, I think the form's a step forward. And the first I heard about it was quite when it was first thought about in a meeting with the monitoring officer. I think it's a great step forward, but there will be members of the public who think somebody's done something wrong, but they don't know which box, the category of standard it is, and they were providing the help. Are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, the recommendation is that the committee note and endorse the new code of conduct complaints form and updated process arrangements, which will be effective immediately. 2, delegate authority to the monitoring officer to keep the process under constant review and make any necessary changes. Note the information presented in relation to code of conduct complaints for 2022. So if we could have a show of hands. Thank you. Unanimous. Item 11, Bribery Act Risk Assessment, over to the Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Chairman. So a specific bribery risk assessment and action plan has been undertaken as reported here for members' comment and information. This complements the work that we already do around the risk of fraud and corruption, which is reported to this committee on a 6-monthly basis. The assessment shows that the controls are generally sound with no red risks, but there are some amber areas in a small number of areas, and these all have actions associated with these. The assessment, which is on the table in front of you, is an exempt paper. So if members, I'll just remind members, if you do have any questions specifically related to anything on that paper, we will have to go into a closed session, and at that point we'll be stopping the recording and we won't be able to go back into onto YouTube. Thank you.
I'll just add on to that. The Bribery Act 2010, there is a companion document from a guide from the Ministry of Justice. And the fact is, with the Bribery Act, you can be subject to unlimited fines if you don't take reasonable steps to prevent bribery. And one of the list of things you are required to do in the Ministry of Justice guide is to have a risk assessment and to understand where your risks are and put processes in place to stop the bribery, and so it's an important step forward in, and I think what Director's been saying, it's sort of pulled knowledge that we've got and put it into this Bribery Act format. And as Dawn said, if we wanted to discuss anything regarding the detailed table, we would need to go into private session now. Thank you. Thank you. That the committee now notes the Bribery Act risk assessment and the future reporting arrangements. Can I confirm that we've noted the documents? Thank you. That is unanimous. Urgent business. There is no urgent business, and I wish to announce that the meeting is now closed at, what is the time?
1958.
1958. Thank you. The meeting is now closed, but members, please stay where you are, as I would like to give